Purpose, functionally, if you want to think about how to use purpose best in your life, purpose is the best of what you have to help others. It's the highest and best use of what you can offer to people, because if you do that, that's where you're going to be the most fulfilled.
You know what always bothered me about college? It was being expected to learn from people that I knew had not done it themselves. You know what bothers me about the information product industry that we live in today? It is being expected to listen to people that haven't done it themselves. Brian Bosché is my guest today. We talk about all sorts of things, but namely, how he builds people that are already experts into experts in their space. It is a fascinating twist on the information product world. Beyond that, it is driven through the lens of making money and finding a purpose and filling that purpose through that process. I love that part of it, because I personally have always struggled with this idea of, do you need to have this grand vision and architecture for your plan, i.e. purpose behind it, or can you just do the thing and figure out the purpose along the way? We go all over the place in this conversation, from being a news anchor to selling self-help products while you're depressed to building an 8-figure empire. Let's dive right into it. Here comes Brian Bosché. Brian Bosché, I am so happy to pin you down. It's been a little journey over the last few months to try to find a time that worked.
Yeah, no, it's good to be with you. I think the last time we saw each other was in Cabo, right?
Indeed. Well, I was unfortunately running to a flight, and you were enjoying a margarita on a beach chair, I believe.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Sorry to drink a margarita in slow motion while you rush to your plane.
It was playing through my head. It was playing through my head as I rushed to my plane. From that moment on, I wanted to have a deeper conversation with you because you do things that are a little bit unique in the world of, I think, education. And so you have a few different companies that revolve around the same topic, but you have a unique spin on them. You know, we do a ton in the info product space and the coaching, consulting, et cetera space. From a payments perspective, we have lots of clients that do that. But from talking to you initially, I thought, oh man, I like this. This is a little different. So can you give a little background on the existing companies and kind of where the focal point is, and then we'll dive in from there?
Yeah, we essentially have a B2C company and a B2B company. So our B2C side, we own expertschool.com, and expertschool.com focuses on creating highly paid experts, speaking, coaching, and consulting. And there's a lot of folks that do that, but what's really unique about us is helping people discover their exact purpose. We have a proprietary purpose discovery methodology that breaks your purpose down into 4 elements, almost like a Myers-Briggs type indicator. And we're able to equip our experts who come into our programs to know exactly who they are, exactly how they're going to be most fulfilled. And we don't craft their offer just in terms of a business opportunity. We do that, but we craft their offer in terms of what's going to most fulfill them, because fulfillment drives long-term motivation, because fulfillment answers motivation's core question. Motivation's core question is what I'm doing worth it? And when you're personally fulfilled, getting gratitude back from the people that help you, fulfillment is what drives your long-term motivation. It's what convinces you to keep going. So that's our B2C side. We have really just 2 offers. We have Expert Mastery and our Expert Mastermind for our higher tier students. And then on the B2B side, we own purposecompany.com as well. So we're doing purpose discovery for organizations, for companies, and for leaders. We have the ability to do enterprise-wide purpose discovery for teams, up to 100,000 employees if you wanted to.
That sounds like a nightmare. So let's talk about that a little bit. Just for frame here, can you give me a size estimate of the company or revenue or whatever metrics make sense to you?
Both of those combined do about 10 million per year. And we have a ton more B2B opportunity, but we're tightening up right now our B2C side. We're getting expertschool.com, its systems, its traffic, and its team real tight in terms of leadership. And we've got a massive list of corporate decision makers that we can target, right, with B2B offers, but we're making sure our B2C team is really, really tight before we really start getting aggressive on our B2B side. So it's right around 10 million.
Love it. Before we dig into the nuances of those models, and I ask you a barrage of questions about them, how did you find yourself in a business talking about purpose?
I love this question because the answer it wasn't intentional. I started out essentially wanting to become a national news anchor. That was a dream that I had since I was 16 years old. And I went all the way through undergrad and actually went to law school to make myself a better broadcaster. And when I came out of law school, I actually became a national journalist covering government corruption and terrorism for about a year until the show that I was working on got cut from the programming schedule. And I, as a result, got laid off. And funny enough, in the midst of all that, I actually was going through a divorce, from somebody whom I met when I was in law school. And that divorce was final in the same month that I got laid off. And it sent me into like a tailspin of depression where it's like everything that I had wrapped my identity in, my job, my marriage, the earning opportunity that I had, and, growing up as, getting to get started as a national journalist out of the gate, all of that was wiped away. So I went into the darkest period of depression in my life because I had never experienced it before. And I had a lot of really well-meaning friends and mentors that were saying, Brian, you need to find your purpose. And I always was very, very frustrated with that word because I was like, what are you talking about? Since I was 16 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And the problem with that is I had confused a job target with purpose. They're not the same thing. Okay. Purpose functionally, if you want to think about how to use purpose best in your life, purpose is the best of what you have to help others. It's the highest and best use of what you can offer to people. Because if you do that, that's where you're going to be the most fulfilled. You name it. I watched it. I read it. I listened to it. And here's what I noticed. Most of the people out there that fit into the, let's say, purpose expertise category really aren't sharing the whole picture. There's really 4 parts to purpose. You'll notice that there are some experts that spend their time focusing on bringing out what's naturally good in a human being. Okay. Then you'll see other experts focused on skills. You'll see other experts focused on passion, and you'll see other experts focus on like coming of age, origin story side of things. And what I realized when I backed up, looked at it 30,000 feet, that there were 4 distinguished elements to purpose. And that was the beginning. And now I guess we're almost 10 years later beyond that initial discovery. What we've done is backed it up with research, but also broken each element down into archetypes. And that's probably something we'll talk about, but our Purpose Finder assessment's coming out in the next 45 to 60 days, and it will be the first of its kind assessment meant to help you understand the elements of your purpose and how to improve your decision-making as a person and a business owner.
So you were going to be a news anchor and the show ended, divorce happened. Did you immediately jump? Like, what's the gap there? Like you dove into how to find your own purpose. When did the business start? Did it start right away? Did you do other things in the interim?
So I spent about a year and a half selling high ticket products. And so that was my introduction. Worked for somebody who became my first business mentor that I met while I was a journalist, and I was selling high ticket products. And it was kind of a very interesting thing because I was selling essentially a similar offer, right? Like how to become a highly paid expert. And I was on the phone one time with this woman, and I'm in the midst of depression. So here I am like selling like self-help products while depressed, right? I am not like a picture perfect example of what it means to live a self-help message. And I'm on the phone with this lady, and she stops me in the middle of my script because I sounded scripted for sure because I was really bad in the beginning. And this lady goes, stop, Brian, listen, I can't buy anything from you. I don't even know my purpose. And I just stopped. And in this like mild fit of sarcasm, I said, I don't either. And I totally just bombed the call because it wasn't going to close anyway. But it became like this focal point where I'm like, that's it. I can't take this anymore. And what was interesting is I met during that period of time. I was living in South Florida. My wife, Gabrielle, was living in Washington, D.C. And we met at the time, and I shared this with her during while we were dating, and she's like, "You've got to turn that into a business." And so about a year and a half after I got laid off, Gabrielle and I got married, and I actually started my first business I could say in a U-Haul, not in a U-Haul literally, but we got back from our honeymoon, and I was moving some stuff out of storage into our new apartment, and I was doing sales calls for my first info product on the road while Gabrielle was driving the U-Haul. I was doing it in the U-Haul cab. I was selling essentially courses on how to start as a self-published author. And what was it was really a cover though, because I was using the self-publishing course, okay, to help people discover their purpose so they'd write a better book. And that first year I did like $200,000 in sales because I had really good mentorship to start. And what happened is that Gabrielle, she was a professional speaker already. So she was speaking on the topic of millennials. So she was getting paid buku dollars helping corporations understand millennials. And we noticed the overlapping talents. And in the midst of that, we decided about 2.5 years into our relationship to merge and go after purpose discovery full time together.
Awesome. That's super helpful because the gap from broadcast to, look, I mean, obviously the skill set overlap is there, but from a business perspective and monetization perspective, totally different worlds, right? You're working from a network as a news anchor versus, and that was the gap, selling high ticket. Did you move into high ticket sales just out of curiosity? How did that happen? How did you end up in that space? Because I feel like contrary to the notion of drive from purpose, you probably accidentally found high ticket and it was just the thing that took over there for some reason.
Yeah. So it kind of all happened at the same time somewhat. So I met my mentor while I was working on a special interest piece. So as a journalist, it wasn't one of those government corruption terrorism stories. We kind of were doing a human interest piece, and it was on a nonprofit that helped the critically ill heroes, the critically ill children of America's heroes. So like police, firefighter, military kind of thing. And I met her doing that story. And in the midst of my depression, like in the month after I got laid off, I just sent her a Facebook message, and she said, "Why don't you just come work for me?" And I literally drove my terrible car 14 hours from Virginia down to South Florida. I had like a suitcase and a coffee machine in the car. She had this beachside condo that had like 3 months left on the lease that she wasn't even using. And it gave me enough runway to get my back on my feet and have my own apartment. And I did everything. I took her Mercedes in for service. I helped her make sure her mail was opened up and organized. I was selling her. I did everything I could to get mentorship by proximity. And in that year and a half, I got more business mentorship than I studied in undergrad. I studied in law school, that compressed period of time. And I knew while selling high ticket that when I created my own first offer, I now have the skill sets to actually get it started. So that's where the connection point happened. Yeah, I kind of fell into high ticket. I did not aspire to be some kind of high ticket closer. That was not even the target.
Well, I think, in that era too. So in that era, that wasn't really a thing. I think now it's being a high ticket closer is packaged as a specific role. It's a specific path that you can go down. But, the journey of selling information started many, many decades ago, pre Tony Robbins to Jim Rohn and before. And it was, books and newsletters and live events. But the whole process has changed. And I want to dig into that model a little bit, but I think that's super interesting. And, for me, were I to do one thing differently, it would have been to work for somebody for free and fucking learn instead of trying to figure it all out myself. But I always felt like I was in a rush. It was always like, I need to do it now. I need to have more now. And if I just put more energy into it now with any mechanism, I will make more now. And it's a step back from any step forward. So it's cool to hear that was a contributing factor in your world.
I think that the best mentorship will disorient you. I think that it will. Like it will challenge every area of your life. Like I grew up in a household, an amazing household, amazing parents, but they were the career track, not the entrepreneurial track. I really had no entrepreneurship model in my family. So that was completely new to me. So when I would be helping her around the house when she was working from home, when I saw that like she wanted to have pictures or art hung in her house, she didn't lift a finger, right? She would hire a handy person to come in and hang the art, like just to watch her not do anything but what she was brilliant at and hire out everything else. I grew up in a DIY household. Everything was DIY. I built a 3,000 square foot deck with my dad one summer. It was the worst experience ever. Both of us would agree with that statement. And so that was like mentorship disorientation. That was like really, really good. And then I would watch everything she did, like how she led, how she created products. I learned copywriting from her for the first time. And that totally wrecked and I saw my mentor just like reach into a safe, grab $100,000 in cash and go to the car dealership and literally buy a car with a wad of cash. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me, right? I'm like, this is incredible. I'm like, I've never seen stuff like this before. So it opened up my eyes. But I didn't stop there. I think a lot of people who do get the benefit of good mentorship on the front end make the mistake of stop growing once that period of mentorship by proximity ends and they assume they know it all. The best lesson I've ever learned is I walk into every learning opportunity as if I know nothing, even if I know something. For example, let's say I have spent millions of dollars in Facebook ads and I ran them myself. When I go into a new learning experience, I assume I haven't. I open my ears to a much broader conversation than my own personal bias would typically allow. And so, that kind of mentorship, the disorientation mentorship that challenges, I mean, it's like when you go to a mastermind, like you join a mastermind for the first time, and let's say this mastermind, you're on the lower part of the totem pole and everybody's more successful than you. And the very first mastermind event you go to, it's like drinking through a fire hose. You're like, your head hurts. Everything in your current paradigms are breaking and you're being challenged on every front. That's what I equate it to. I think that's the best kind of mentorship.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that when you are in an environment, one of the most common mistakes new entrepreneurs make is that they get into environments where people are playing at a higher level and they pretend that they are also at that higher level. And the irony is that nobody likes that. And the people at the higher level just want to get away from that person. And all they need to do is own their ignorance and say, I don't know. And the higher level will adopt them and say, I'll tell you.
You were with me. You were at the mastermind, at the Cabo mastermind we were talking about at the beginning. Tom Bilyeu spoke at that mastermind. And he said, I am okay with being embarrassed, being stupid, because I embarrassed myself all the way to a $35 million house. And pretending like you've got it. Look, I think it's a pastor who says it. I think his name's Pastor Craig Rochelle, says, a lie believed to be true will affect your life as if it were true. So when you place yourself under delusions, you will continue to operate as if that's your reality. So if your company's, if you walk into one of those masterminds and and you feel like you have to like engage in some puffery, no, I'm really doing this revenue when I'm doing this. If you keep saying that, you'll start believing and acting like you are, get yourself in debt, be irresponsible with your money, not build your fundamentals correctly, poorly lead your team, and it becomes a house of cards. But it was based on something you believed. And even though it was false, it affected your life as if it were true. And I think that being okay with being ignorant or not knowing something opens you up to the not only the breadth of learning, but the depth of learning on many subjects.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's, words are very powerful and you have to be very careful about what you say, not only to others, but what you say to yourself. And that's a slippery slope. I get reminded periodically of this is a common narrative, but of the reality that if you took your internal narrative and spoke it out loud, people would think you were crazy. Like the number of times that you reiterate something to yourself that's infrequently it's a negative loop, people would think you were crazy. And you have to be really careful of that because nobody hears it, so nobody can call you out. I love that. Okay, so I like this. Let's talk about the business and kind of the launch of the business. I want to talk about purpose a little bit too, but you didn't know. So you had an intersection with your now wife where you decided to go all in on purpose. Did you feel like you had a purpose before you got to that point?
I did, like all the way up to like I got to be a national journalist. And then this idea that purpose is a specific job, when I got laid off from my dream job, that idea that purpose was my job died. And a good example of that would be if for your whole life, for example, you wanted to be an NFL football player and then you make it to the NFL, but after one season you get cut. Does that mean you don't have a purpose? No. It means you need to gather the best of what you got from that experience and package it into something new that you can offer entrepreneurially or in a new career. That's what it means. So I had a misaligned understanding of what purpose really was. And when I came to the conclusion that was the best of what I have to help others, it gives such redemption value to the seasons in your life and business that you thought were bad or failures. Because it means every time I come out of a trough moment, come out of the bottom, I can say, yeah, no, it's okay. Because now I get to package the best of these lessons for the next season of my growth. So when you think of purpose as the best of what you have to help others, it's the best reframe for even when you experience those really, really depressed moments.
Yeah, I like that frame a lot. I guess, where my head was or where I'm going with that is a lot of, you segmented it into four different categories, but a lot of people, they're kind of two different camps. There's a group of entrepreneurs that rant about finding your purpose and it's sort of like mission value alignment and it has to be perfect in order to move forward. And that's what it's all about. And then there are others that just say, fuck it, just fucking go. Like, what are you doing? Just do things. Where does this fit on that spectrum? Do you have to have your purpose to build a business? Can you find your purpose through building a business?
No, I don't. So no, I don't think you have to know the best of what you have to help others to start a business. I think you'll start a more successful business that is more fulfilling to you if you do. Or if you're already in a business, getting more clear on the best of what you have to help others will help you realign your position. Here's an example. Let's say you take a tech founder who is also the CEO. So he founds the company. He's the CEO of the company. And this thing that he loved when he started it, he hates it.
Sure.
And the truth is, it's because they've actually gotten away from the fulfillment side. Okay. Because it becomes all about giving, but it also becomes all about the administrative stuff it takes to structure and grow a business. And they've actually put distance between them and the customer transformation they wanted to actually provide. You see, fulfillment is the result of helping others with your purpose, and human beings receive fulfillment in three primary ways. The first one is gratitude from the people that you help. The second one is getting the opportunity to observe the people that you help and their transformation. And then finally, the third one is results. Now, in the order in which I just said that, you go from most fulfillment to least fulfillment. So making more money, getting a new handbag, getting a new watch, getting a new house, that's personal results, but it's not going to fulfill you as much as if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, Brian, thank you so much. I can't believe it. Like, I have radical clarity on my life now, and I know exactly what I want to do. I think you just changed the trajectory of my entire life. I've gotten tons of those messages before, and I've had tons of people say that. I get that every single day. There's no amount of money, no new car, no new house, no new vacation that is ever going to fulfill me as much as that statement of gratitude. And so a lot of founders put distance between themselves and the customers, distance between themselves and the majority of their team, and they're severing their fulfillment feedback loop and making it only about admin, growth, and the results side, but they're getting so disconnected from the emotional side, okay? So it's not that it fits in one of those camps or the other camps. It's just not the entire picture. Because you might get some kind of advice like Gary Vee, he's the type of person that just says, find a skill that you're remotely good at, or however he talks, right? Find a skill that you're remotely good at, right? And then go all in on that thing. I do think in offhand advice, that's not bad, right? But there's other things too, like a skill, great. So I can go use that skill to make money. The way we look at passion, for example, that's the third element of your purpose. We describe it like this: pull passion. Because passion, according to the Oxford Dictionary, second definition is a barely controllable emotion. Now, when you look at passion like that, do you want to make decisions in your life based on barely controllable emotions? And if you have barely controllable emotions for ice cream or barely controlled anger towards a team member, that's probably not going to lead to the best decision. It's better to look at passion as the problem in the world that you want to solve. That's why it pulls you. It pulls you to the future. That's why we call it pull passion. So while you could go after a singular skill that you're good at, that's great, but let's put it into the context of the problem in the world that you want to solve, the thing that keeps you up at night, the thing that you want to solve that nobody else has solved.
There's a lot there.
A ton. There's more.
About with that is the reality, and we were talking about this actually before we hit the record button, but the reality that as you grow, specifically as an entrepreneur, as you grow a company, your role as the CEO changes. And so when you go from, 0 to 100 grand to $1 million to 5 to 10 to 50 to 100, et cetera, the responsibilities of you as a CEO change, and the company that demands it, the entity that you've created, the beast that you've created, demands it. So through this lens of purpose, how do you do that? What's your suggestion for growth through that path? Do you, accept the reality that for a period of time you have to do something that isn't in direct alignment for the future good? Or do you never do those things and try to delegate all of them?
No, it's impossible to delegate everything in the beginning, especially if you have no money in the beginning, right? We all start DIY if we start from zero. I could go really deep and break that down into all four elements. But if I were to give a quick piece of advice, it looks like this: always respect your brilliance. So for example, if I have developed the best methodology for somebody to discover their exact purpose, experience fulfillment, and then leverage that as a decision-making tool, if that's my brilliance, it's no matter what role I play as the CEO or what positions I have to play to help grow it initially, is to never abandon that brilliance. Because if I get all the way to the top of a 100-person organization that has a B2B operation and a B2C operation, the true brilliance that I have to offer to the world is the precise discovery of purpose and leveraging it as a decision-making tool. So my goal is actually to, over time, as I get more leverage and I create more profit, I can fire myself from all the things that are not directly connected to that thing. And so, of course, I think there's a law as immutable as gravity. It is breakthrough requires sacrifice. It's actually connected to this idea of motivation. I think the only question you have to answer with motivation is what I'm doing worth it? Because breakthrough requires sacrifice. So if you have determined in your subconscious mind or your conscious mind that what you're doing is not worth it, then you will not be motivated, because you need to be able to overcome sacrifice. So in the beginning, we sit in every single position, right? We're doing the sales, we're doing the marketing, we're creating the product, we're building the systems, we're doing all those things. But ultimately, I want my obsessive focus on the product and customer experience around the precise discovery of purpose and fire myself from everything else. And so in the beginning, the sacrifice is usually on the traffic side, the system side, the hiring, the team side. No, I don't love those things. That's not my first love. I love people. I love leading people, but I don't like all that stuff the most. And so the quick piece of advice is you should always be operating in your brilliance, whether your company is just starting and you're shooting for your first 100 grand or your company's doing $100 million. Never, ever, ever delegate that brilliance, because that's the stuff that's going to fulfill you the most when you see it create transformation in others' lives.
So holding that simultaneous to the reality that breakthrough requires sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. I love that frame. And I think it's most important. You know what? I was going to say, I think it's most important for the people that think that they have to be living in this blissful state of, passion all the time. And that's not fair. That's just because that's the antithesis of my reality.
Do you see my under eyes today? This is not normal. This wasn't bliss that created these under eyes today. Okay. This was a lot of work over the last week that created that. It's not the bliss you live for. I hate the concept of the flow state. I hate it. I hate giving people that delusion that there is such bullshit thing as a flow state. It's not a thing. It's not a thing, because there are days where you wake up and you're not in flow state, but you still need to get up and lead your team. You still need to get up and honor your brilliance, and you got to honor your expertise. Maybe a little bit of a rant here, and you probably agree with this rant too. What is the appeal typically to get into the high ticket industry and sell info products? Laptop lifestyle, make a lot of money, passive income. But the reality of doing it well and serving people is not laptop lifestyle. It's not passive. What about this space is passive? That is such crap, right? Even the most automated funnels are not passive income. Okay. It's such crap. And I think what it does though, is it creates a lot of coaches and experts that actually hurt people. They hurt people because they're not obsessed with customer experience. In fact, you'll look at their daily calendar and you'll see that they devote no time to the betterment of the customer experience and to the increase of their expertise. It's all about making more money, building the system stronger, and all that stuff. And that's great. Got to do that. But you can't neglect the thing that makes the most difference in people's lives. And if you neglect that thing anyway, you're actually starving yourself of fulfillment. Okay, rant over. I just started to go down a rant about the info product space and where we sometimes mess up in terms of targets.
As you know, we heavily serve that space. So I can echo a lot of that. I also think that a really important thing for people to know when they're seeking residual income and sort of this notion of put it on cruise control and just have an engine that pumps out cash for you is the best engines in the world are typically the ones that require the most maintenance. And if you're not putting time and energy into honing it, it's going to fucking break. So I love that. I love that frame. And I also, for me, to fuel your rant here further.
Oh, thanks.
The client experience is everything. Like, it is the value. And you can't provide the best experience if you're not continuing to educate yourself and stay on top of your game. And I see that in info routinely, where people fall out of their area of expertise. And even if they were great when they first started it, because they were so in it, they fall out of doing the thing and they just go into teaching the thing. And at some point, there's a disconnect if they don't stay on top of their craft.
Ultimately, a competitor kicks them in the teeth. A competitor that does build their craft every single day. I consume at least an hour plus of content every single day, whether it's reading a book or listening to a book or watching something related to my subject area of expertise, because it's the most important thing. I learned from Sam Ovens taught me this, that really there's 4 categories to your business: product, traffic, team, and systems. And the last 3 don't exist without the first one. Product first, customer transformation first, and then the rest of it supports that. And I think a lot of people want traffic and team. Actually, no, they just look at it with one big dollar sign. They want to make a lot of money, and there's nothing wrong with making a lot of money. There's not actually 4 categories. It's just a dollar sign. And I think it becomes like this, like bug lamp, right? And you ultimately find that if you keep making that the main thing, you'll get burned. You'll get burned, and you won't last. You'll be here 2 to 3 years. You'll be what my wife and business partner Gab calls a pop-up coach. Here one day, gone the next, because the main target was the laptop lifestyle and the money. But it's like the rant really though is like, even if you want to be selfish, you're hurting yourself. Like, you're like starving yourself of the greatest thing in the world, which is to be fulfilled by your work and fulfilled in helping your audience.
I agree. I agree. And there are so many examples across all industry, all of business, and certainly you can find them in personal, of people that have created amazing things, but got complacent. And they all erode. They all die without innovation and consistent improvement on the client experience and the product. All of them.
Beyond a Million is brought to you by Easy Pay Direct. If you're an entrepreneur and you are still using a product like Stripe or PayPal to accept payments, it is time to find out why the largest names in your industry would never consider doing that. Check out easypaydirect.com/BAM to find out more.
So let's talk about the development of your product and the rise of your company. So I want to talk about let's start there, because I have a path I want to go down here. But so you decide, hey, purpose is at the center of it. You and your wife are going to jump on it and do it together. What's the beginning of that, and what's year one look like, from a product creation and revenue standpoint, and how did it grow from there?
So here's how this started. So when we first got married, I had my own info product teaching people how to become self-published authors, and it did pretty good. It did $200,000 in its first year. The second year was like $250,000. There was a lot I needed to learn, right? Gabrielle was already speaking successfully as a speaker on Millennials, and I was getting kind of tired of the self-publishing thing because that wasn't like what I loved. I loved the helping people discover their exact purpose, and I kept telling Gab throughout that process, I said, Gab, purpose discovery has an ROI for B2B. She's like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, like companies aren't going to buy that. Okay. Companies aren't going to buy that. And she would say this, by the way, she would totally say this. I'm not like dogging her. So anyway, I said, you know what? Why don't we merge? Why don't we help companies, help individuals, merge, both speak, all of that. And I remember the first time we tried this out, a major grocery store chain brought us into the executive HR suite to do a 2-day executive brief. And Gabrielle and I were both speaking. And then in the midst of Gabrielle speaking, she wanted to take a break. And she's like, Brian, take over. Right. And I'm like, oh, perfect opportunity. Gabrielle leaves the room. Okay. And I said, hey guys, I know we were going to talk about the thing on the PowerPoint, but we're actually not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about purpose. And I went down a line of teaching on the subject of origin story, which is the moment or series of moments that most shaped your perspective and decision-making in your developmental years. And a whole bunch of people in the room actually ended up crying, going through their childhood moments that most shaped their perspective. Okay. Gabrielle actually came back into the room as they were all crying. And as a result, at the end of this 2-day onsite, this team was closer, more respectful of each other, and already jiving better together as a team. And they were literally saying, we've got to have you back. We've got to have you back. And Gabrielle's like, okay, you were right. Okay. So we start working together, and we weren't even going to get into the high ticket info product space initially, because we were making 40 to 70 grand a month speaking and training. Okay. So we
basically no overhead, I would imagine.
No, I had one person helping us book engagements, and we weren't even using a speakers bureau. We were doing it ourselves, generating all of our own leads. No paid marketing, nothing. Anyway, COVID hits, right? Which seems to be the kind of go-to story for everybody. How COVID changed their business, right? This is a fun line of questioning. COVID hits and all speaking disappears, all of it. In fact, in 3 days, I got phone calls representing $250,000 in speaking fees wanting to cancel. And I was like, oh, this is real. So that happens. And we were already coaching executives and VIP types on purpose discovery, doing kind of executive coaching. I would have 4 to 6 clients at a time. And Gab and I were like, well, you know what? I guess it's time to go all in on that. And right at the beginning of COVID in March 2020, we launched, and we were $1 million per year company within about a year and a half as a result of selling our high ticket product.
Awesome. And you refer to that as B2C, but I imagine you're largely targeting entrepreneurs for that, right?
So our target actually isn't entrepreneurs, not intentionally. We target corporate professionals, leaders, and executives. So who we're targeting is high income, financially qualified, but incredibly unfulfilled. So we're looking for the high earning, unfulfilled professionals who want to package their expertise as a speaker, coach, or consultant. So if you're hearing this, we're actually not going towards the space that most people are going, the audience that most people go after. I'm looking for the highly unfulfilled corporate professional. This ended up being a feat of genius that wasn't intentionally genius. Okay. So, because now our email list is actually full of corporate decision makers. We intended to help unfulfilled corporate professionals. Okay. And then
Sorry, I recall this now. This is all coming back to me, and I'm going to blame the tequila because while I was going to the airport,
are you blaming my tequila or are you blaming your tequila?
blaming my tequila. As I was going to the airport and not participating in your margarita, I had my own ahead of time. But this is the unique thing, and I think for people that are selling information and education, you just said it, which is that was the unique shift on it. You're targeting a different market, and it changes it from being a sort of business opportunity pitch to, and as you would say, a purpose-driven pitch. But you're already targeting performers. And so it's not a question of, are you capable or am I capable, the buyer, of making money doing something? It's let me shift and align and leverage my current expertise to do so. But they are actually experts in some capacity because they're high earners in some space.
They've got 5, 7, 10, 15, 20 years of experience in their space. So that's taken care of. They're financially qualified. So that solves the purchasing power problem. And they're unfulfilled, which means they have massive pain. So they're pretty motivated. And then we also have, there's really an ego play too. If you want to be a speaker, write a book, or be a consultant, you have a little bit of ego. And people spend an enormous amount of resources on things that satisfy their ego. In classic marketing, right? Don't fight human nature. I'm not here to manipulate that. I'm here to leverage that to help you be better. Like if you want to be a speaker, if you want to be a consultant, if you want to be a coach, if you want to write a book and you're an unfulfilled corporate professional, I can solve the fulfillment problem. You can go out and leverage the best of your skill sets, but not have to do it under the tutelage of a bad boss or something like that. I think that's the opportunity. I call it having a unique selling proposition and a unique selling position. Unique selling proposition is we can show you exactly what your purpose is. So you know when you make money, you'll also be fulfilled. And a unique selling position, meaning most of the info product space is targeting not my audience. They're not targeting the unfulfilled corporate executive, leader, professional. And I think that gives us a good advantage. But what ended up being funny is that as we started thinking about B2B, I mean, what's the likelihood that every single person on my email list is going to become a entrepreneurial expert, like their own business? No, the majority of them will not. They're all sitting at companies whose people desperately need to know their purpose. And so we're actually, like I said, tactically, we actually are holding back B2B. I've got millions and millions of dollars sitting on our customer list of people who could bring us into their companies to do purpose discovery and for their people at scale.
So, okay, I want to talk about this and I think this will all tie together, but talk about this purely from a business perspective for you. So you start, and this is what I heard so far, is you start because your wife is already speaking to these audiences. So this is a logical door into big companies or some companies because they're hiring a speaker, right? So it makes sense that you would be in that space in the beginning. But as you get going through COVID, speaking dries up and you say, hey, we're going to target these people to teach them to become experts in their space and create a business model around it. At that point, why not just keep going down that path? Why go back into the corporate side of things? Because the corporate world is just fundamentally, first of all, your USP is different in the corporate world. And second, it's a totally different beast to navigate, right? Selling high ticket and having that business model running, it's a different business model than dealing with, Fortune 1000s or 5000s or whatever. Why? Why are you doing both?
Because I hate when people don't know their purpose. And I hate it. I can't, I'm serious. It's like, I guess I'm putting on the hero cape here. No, I really hate it. So when corporations, John Maxwell says this, he says that, leadership is influence and everything rises and falls on leadership. Caveat though, everything rises and falls on a leader first knowing who he or she is. If a leader that clearly knows their purpose is a secure, non-micromanaging leader who is more of a coach than a boss. A leader who does not know their purpose is the opposite of those things, not ideal for leading their people. So the way I look at it, if I can go help the leaders of these Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies lead their people better, know their purpose, and help their people find their purpose, not for the point of leaving. No, because purpose, if you know the best of what you have to offer, you know how to operate in your best in your position and experience fulfillment. And if a company's big enough and you're not in the right position, you can move to a position where you will be more fulfilled. So the answer is yes, totally different business model, right? And we're talking about a totally different sale. A business to consumer coaching sale, that can be done in 1 or 2 calls. B2B deals, 4, 5, 6 interactions, and maybe a 3 to 6 month closing cycle. But the deal values are much, much bigger. But for me, the majority of people aren't entrepreneurs. The majority of people are in a career. And the only way I can help people who are in their careers optimize their career if they never leave the career world is to help leaders help them find their purpose. And that really is the motivation behind it. Is I've seen many companies totally turn around, even if they're as big as a cruise ship, because one leader in the organization, maybe the CEO, discovered his or her purpose.
I like this. So the through line obviously is your desire to help people with purpose, and the fundamentals of the product sound like they're the same, but they're packaged differently.
Yeah, they are packaged differently.
You think about creating, and I think that the lesson for anybody that's I'd say first and foremost established with one client experience, with one journey, with a focal point that's interesting. The lesson here is that you're tapping, and there's direct connection with you. And you mentioned you've got this huge list that you can leverage right now, but you opened up a totally new market with the same product concept and repositioned what you had. How did you think about redesigning that product?
It's interesting because in our book, The Purpose Factor, is where we kind of like have all of this, the beginnings of this intellectual property that turned into info products and all of that. When we wrote that book, we wanted a corporate executive and a stay-at-home parent to be able to read it and use it. So it was a purpose discovery process that was meant for either one of those audiences, like on 2 different spectrums. And the way that we looked at it for companies is, we help people monetize their expertise on the consumer side. So what we do is we strip that part out and we focus entirely on the purpose discovery side for companies and leaders. Now, do most companies bring us in for purpose discovery? No. People, the reason for buying is always different, right? They want to increase revenue, increase productivity, increase profitability. And the number one reason we get brought in is employee retention and engagement. So the main pain point we're striking towards is retention and engagement. And the vehicle by which we make that happen is purpose, because there's really 3 primary reasons that keeps a employee at a company. Okay, they're clear on their purpose. Number 1, they know the best of what they have to offer, and they can connect it to the overall mission of the organization. That's the first one. The second one is their bosses transform into mentor coaches, and the third one is they have a legitimate, real friend at work. Not somebody they're just friendly with in the office, but they would actually go out and get drinks with after they've been in the office. If you strike at those 3 things, you have the highest likelihood of retaining your employees for the long term. So we come in under that, but we leverage our purpose discovery process to make that happen.
Did you deliberately learn that ahead of time going into it, or was that trial and error as you tried to jam your purpose message into the corporate world?
It did, by the way, it does feel like jamming it. Sometimes it does. I'm like, because there's we could get really wonky here, but like diffusion of innovation theory, there's going to be some executives that are innovators and early adopters, and their primary buying reason is purpose discovery. And then there's going to be the early majority and late majority types that they don't give a crap about purpose, but they do care about retention and engagement. And so we can massage the sale depending on what type of buyer. If we have an innovator early adopter, we can talk about purpose all day long and they'll go, oh my gosh, you got to come into our company. But if it's one of those late adopter types and they're like the work is work and personal life is personal life, and we're only here to make money and that's it, and that's all I care about, then we focus on how it affects profit, retention, and engagement, and we come in under that. That's how we ram it down a company's throat, if you will.
Yes. And did you figure that out after, pitching or doing this 5, 10, 15, 100 times?
Yeah. You learn it pretty quick because one of the primary objections you get when you're selling corporations on purpose discovery. Wait. I can't have my people discover their purpose. They're going to quit. They'll quit. Funny enough. Yeah, no, it's the number one objection. It really is the number one objection. Here's the thing. Most people don't want to quit. Most people like certainty, even if it's miserable certainty. Okay. So if I can take the position you're in so you can keep your certainty and teach you how to be more fulfilled in that position, you are actually more likely to stay at that company than go to another company, because most people don't want to rock the boat. They prefer the certainty, even if the certainty is miserable, but we can remove the miserable part and create certainty, but also create fulfillment at the same time. So, and there's actually tons of studies on it, actually. I can't quote them all off the top of my head, but there's tons of studies that show if employees feel that their individual purpose and mission is connected to the overall company's mission and purpose, they're actually more likely to stay, not leave.
Yeah, I mean, that completely tracks with me. I routinely, inside the walls of Easy Pay Direct, talk about hiring and firing based on values and KPIs. And the value alignment, the KPI thing speaks for itself. I think you're either doing your job or you're not. You're either performing or you're not. But the value alignment is so important. And as a leader, it's really important for me to be dialed into whether or not, figuring out on the front end whether or not that new person is going to fit with the purpose of the company, the values of the company, where we're going. And it's not my job to get them to fit with the values or purpose of the company. It's to find the people whose values already fit with what we're doing.
Yeah, that's the ideal, right? You want to hire for it, right? I've gotten to know a really great author over the last couple of years a little bit. His name's Dr. Henry Cloud. He wrote a really great book, Boundaries. He's a clinical psychologist, sold a very successful set of practices to a private equity firm. And now he's essentially working with big companies on the subject of leadership, executive coach, you name it. And he talks about how culture requires two things, okay? Culture and performance. A great corporate culture has culture and performance. Now, performance is what you're talking about. It's the KPIs. The culture, actually, he said, is psychological safety, because people who perceive their environment to be safe will actually take more risks to create better solutions to the problem. So when you engage in like fear and politics, you're actually pushing down innovation. I would add one more thing. It's important for us as leaders to create psychologically safe environments, but it's also important for us to teach our people to be resilient. So you got to meet it both ways. I am psychologically safe as a leader, and I teach my people to be more resilient. And the combination of those two things also can help produce an increase in KPIs, an increase in performance, because they need both. An individual needs both. If you're not performing well in your job, if you're not posting numbers, especially if you're in sales, if you're not making money, you're not going to be fulfilled, right? Because, results is part of the fulfillment feedback loop. But if you also feel like your boss is breathing down your neck, it's a fear-based organization, and your boss hasn't taught you how to be resilient in the position, this erodes what we can do.
Would an analogy there or a synonym to resilient be the ability to work through failure or the acceptance of failure in the organization?
Yes. The answer is absolutely yes to that. We have to teach people how to handle those things, because, if you look at it, I think culturally we're in a place where we're really, really focused on the psychological safety, sometimes almost to an extreme. But we're not teaching resilience. We're starving people of the things that are going to make them strong mentally, strong emotionally, strong performers at work. And it's being the coach. Like, as a leader, my job is to be a coach and a mentor. Okay. And and for me, what that means is I've got to teach them when they're at the absolute bottom of their performance, help them juice out of that trough moment the best lessons possible to not experience the same exact thing next time. That's teaching them to be resilient. But it's also, too, a great leader will take off his or her armor first before they expect their team to do the same thing. So I can teach all day about resilience and do my best to create psychological safety. But if I never show the times in which I struggle with those things or talk about those things, then they see me as this guy sitting on a pedestal that seems to have never experienced any setbacks or trough moments. And then I'm telling them to be resilient and push through. So it's really important for me to be vulnerable in a lot of ways to show them that whatever low they've been to, I've been there too, or probably even lower if I'm running a company.
But Brian, how could I possibly do that when I never make any mistakes?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, you probably don't. Brad, you probably don't. I make a lot of mistakes, but Brad, you probably don't make any mistakes.
Jokes. So, yeah, that all makes sense. And I think, the first part of that in my head, and maybe you think about this differently, but is creating a culture where it's okay to make mistakes. And then it's figuring out how to allow people to learn and grow from the mistakes. And that's the resilience part. It's teaching people not only is it okay, but this is actually the path. And here is the path to learning from that and getting better.
Yeah. And I think a lot of leaders are afraid to let their people make mistakes. And the way you solve that is how much power you delegate. Okay. So somebody can only make, the scope of mistakes they can make is determined by how much power you give them. And so if we enable somebody to do their job, we have to determine, okay, if this team member who I've put in this role does make a mistake, what is the greatest amount of damage they could do on their worst day? And if you don't like the answer to that question, you're probably delegating too much to this new team member or this team member that's been on the team for a while, but they're in a new position. And so the way that you mitigate your risk in terms of like how bad can the mistake be is you have to determine how much you delegate. So if you delegate a little, you give them like bumpers in the bowling lanes. Then you delegate some more and you pull down the bumpers in the bowling lanes. And we start to see them prosper and grow. I think Jordan Peterson talked about this. He says, in terms of raising children, the world is a very dangerous place. It is both a physically dangerous place and a psychologically dangerous place. So I don't bubble wrap my kid to prepare them for a psychologically and physically dangerous world. Over time, as they grow up, I increase their risk, I increase their exposure, and teach them how to operate in that world. The same is true for new team members. I give them a little bit of risk, a little bit more risk, a little bit more risk as they grow and mature, so that I know that I'm mitigating against the greatest possible risk that could happen if somebody's given too much in the beginning.
Yeah, I like that approach. Well, look, I know that we are coming up on time, but I want to talk a little bit about the business model currently with the high ticket, because you've got the two arms, right? We talked about the corporate side of things, which is interesting, but high ticket was the beginning. So how are you currently generating leads for that? Is it ad driven now? What do the metrics look like? How tightly do you track that stuff? How are you closing things? What does that funnel look like?
Yeah, super tight. It's primarily ad driven, but one of the big targets that we have over the next 12 to 18 months is we're going to be very, very, very aggressive on personal brand. So we'll be introducing a lot more organic into that mix. And so it's VSL driven. Classic funnel, right? Ad, VSL, book an appointment. And then of course we have a setting team and an outbound team that helps us optimize that funnel even beyond what automated bookings we get. And then of course, some of our top performing students in the lower tier product will move up into our mastermind. So it's very classically structured. I don't like complex funnels. I don't like complex things because it's just more things that can break. I would rather spend the amount of time I'm trying to hack my way to financial performance in my funnels. I can do that, but I would actually rather just massively increase the transformative power of the product. one of my favorite quotes, the attribution of the quote escapes me at the moment, but one of my favorite quotes is, transform lives and you'll have to lock the doors to keep people out, because people want to go where their lives are transformed. So I keep my funnel super tight. I know my metrics. I know typically my cost per lead, cost per acquisition, all those things. But if I lose sight of transforming the customer's outcome, that is actually what affects the effectiveness of my marketing and sales the most. So that's where I spend most of my time. Kind of classic numbers when it comes to cost per call ends up being somewhere between $150 to $250. Cost per acquisition ends up being somewhere in the neighborhood of, if our marketing's performing super well, closer to 1,000. If it's not performing so good, it's closer to 2,000. So in terms of the range that you can see, this is funny that you ask these questions, because I am actually in the midst right now of handing over marketing off of my plate into a really talented agency's hands. I mean, we're working with Brian Moncada over at adspin.com, and they're just doing an incredible job because I'm making room on my calendar to build the next big moves of our company. So I'm actually as you asked that question, I'm in the midst of handing off marketing right now to very capable hands.
Cool. I always have questions about handing things off to an agency. So you're handing them off to an agency that you have seen be effective for you so far.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Got it. So you have evidence that this is a good idea.
Yeah, we started on one platform, YouTube. Performance is good there. They're taking over Facebook next. And then we'll actually decide where the majority of the cold traffic will come from as we kind of compete the platforms and see what offers the highest quality leads and the lowest cost leads as well. So they're doing a good job. I mean, I think handing stuff off to an agency, I think the mistake that people make is they're like, here's all my marketing, and they hand it over. I think that's kind of dumb. But if we start with one platform and we expand it to other platforms as we see performance, which in our case is what we're doing, I think that's a much better approach. I mean, you can either do it in-house or you hire somebody. And I was our primary marketer. We didn't, up till this point, have an ad buyer in-house. And I made the judgment call that I would rather have a very, very capable agency do it for this next season than spend a whole bunch of time training somebody, even somebody who does know marketing very well. They're a talented ad buyer on whatever the platform is. I recognize that I place more value on having a white calendar for our next big moves than training somebody to be an effective ad buyer inside of our business.
What do you think the biggest mistake is that you've made in growing this high ticket B2C company?
Oh man, that's a good one. I know exactly the answer to that question. I think we could be where we're at right now a year ago. And the reason for that is, while I've always been obsessed about getting great mentorship, I didn't invest enough. I would invest more in my personal development, because all of personal development is about making better decisions. If you think about it, if I buy a real estate course, it's because I want to buy the right properties out of the gate, not take a bath. And why is that? Because all of personal development is about making better decisions, because making better decisions compresses time. And so what I would do in the past is I would invest in some learning experience that would teach me some new skill for my business. And I'd kind of ride that wave out for 3, 6, 9 months, stupidly enough. And then I'd buy my next learning experience. And what I realized is I needed to have no gaps between the learning experiences. And I just needed to learn, work, and not have these periods of coasting between my learning experiences. So anytime a period of time concludes on a learning experience, I'm immediately investing in the next one. And that's what's compressing time. So my biggest mistake, we've never not been profitable. We've never lost money on ads, all kinds of great performance in our past. However, that might actually be evidence we have been too careful. So the only thing that I would say is I could have gone a lot faster if I had not coasted between my learning experiences. So if anybody's listening to this and you're like, gosh, it's been like 3 or 6 months since my last learning experience, or some course or mastermind or whatever, I'm like, that's not good. From my own personal experience, that's not good. I could be where I'm at right now a year ago.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. I think the flip side of that is make sure you have enough time to actually learn the lesson.
Yes, exactly. And it's so true. And I think there's like a fine line, like, there's definitely, I guess you could say, one of my friends kind of calls it this. There's winter seasons in our life. Like there are seasons where life kind of sucks a little bit and business is just okay or not great. And those are seasons in which we're gathering lessons and wisdom and perspective to when we get into the spring and we get into the summer. If I could keep using these seasons, analogies, we're going to be much better prepared to attack those things. So always stopping to document the lessons, because sometimes another mistake you could make when investing in like learning and improving your skill set is you fail to fully juice out every lesson you've learned to date before you get into your next venture and actually doing an inventory on that.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think that, I think maybe said another way, it's very common to go after a shiny object when what you have in your hand still has a lot left to give you.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of describing my temptation from just a few minutes ago when you were talking about B2C and B2B. I mean, there's loads of opportunity in our relational network on B2B, more than my team can handle. That's the problem, right? And even if I were to devote time to hiring a team, like a talented, B2B closer and a talented account manager to go after the first contracts, and finish out the product or finishing out some of our product offerings, but that's pretty much done. Even that would potentially be a distraction from creating operational excellence in expertschool.com, our consumer product. So I totally get what you're saying. Is it a shiny object, or am I supposed to be doing it? If I am, my new rule right now is I can't start a new thing unless I, clear space, number one. But I think what happens is if we grow up DIY as an entrepreneur, the mistake we make is staying DIY. And so now the rule is I can't do it unless I can hire out the creation of something or the build of something. And I also can't do it unless there's a team to fulfill on it, when I used to think that was my responsibility. So I have rules in place before I even start new things now.
Good lessons. Brian Bosché, I appreciate you carving out time today, man. I have a litany of other questions, but for now, where do you want to point people? Where can people find out more about you or figuring out what their purpose is?
Of course, head over to purposecompany.com. That's the place to go. That's the place to go to find purpose.
I love it. Brian, thanks so much, man.
Love it. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed doing it. I need your help. There are 3 places you can find Beyond a Million. The podcast itself, beyondamillion.com, which has some cool free resources, including a free course. And we finally launched the Beyond a Million YouTube channel. I would love it if you would go there and subscribe. And if you don't want to, you still would probably enjoy seeing the visual content. Check it out, youtube.com/@Beyond a Million.